The turn of the century was drawing near, and the age of the gunslinging cowboy was coming to an end. But just because a more civilized age was just around the corner, it doesn't mean we can't have one more adventure. Greetings, fanboys and fangirls. I'm Erod and I'm the Blockbuster Buster, and our story begins with the two biggest franchises of the 80s, Star Wars and Indiana Jones. Two completely different franchises with two major elements in common. They were both created by George Lucas, and they were both based on action-adventure movie serials. 20th Century Fox, who had found a great deal of success distributing the Star Wars movies, wanted something like that for the relatively young Fox network. So Fox executive Bob Greenblatt approached the writers of Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, Jeffrey Boehm and Carlton Hughes, in hopes that they had an idea for a series in that same style. According to Boehm, in preparation for writing Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, he watched a lot of action-adventure serials, and he found that most of them pertained to one of two genres, sci-fi or western. So he decided for this proposed Fox series to combine the two, and thus The Adventures of Brisco County Jr. was born. The plot. The year is 1893, just 7 years removed from the turn of the century and the end of the Wild West, and San Francisco's greatest lawman, Marshall County Sr., has just rounded up 13 of the most notorious criminals from the era, the John Bly Gang. Unfortunately, the outlaws free themselves mid-transport and kill Marshall County. So the rubber barons of the West hire his son, Brisco County Jr., to round up the Bly Gang and set things right. But little do they know that this conflict is far more complicated than they anticipated, and paranormal in nature.
It's an unearthed foreign object. All right, all aboard!
Cast and characters. Before we talk about the main cast, I just want to give a shout out to some of the amazing supporting characters in this show. Like Marshall County, played by R. Lee Ermey. They couldn't have picked anyone better to play Brisco County Jr.'s father.
You make me proud, son, but then you always have.
Lee Powell, played by the legendary James Hong, there to explain the more supernatural elements of the show and bring more gravitas to the series.
It is in life. Our path is not always a pleasant one.
And last but not least, Sheriff Aaron Viva, the law in the little town of Hard Rock, master of hand-to-hand combat, king of cool, and lover of lunch.
And you know what that means?
What?
Lunch.
Now, this was very much a villain of the week show, so there were lots and lots of bad guys. So much so that, here's a personal fun fact. Because I watched the show on syndicated cable television out of order, I didn't actually get to see the pilot, so I didn't know that 13 men executed Brisco's father. So I would tune in to watch the show, and Brisco would run into a bad guy and say,
"It was the same man that killed my father."
And then, by the end of the episode, he would either kill or apprehend that bad guy. Then, the very next week, he would run into a completely different bad guy and say,
One of the men who killed my father.
and the cycle would repeat itself. So, not only was I confused, but for the longest time, I honestly thought that that was a running gag. The one villain of the week that I want to highlight is Winston Smiles, played by the legendary David Warner. Just a very cerebral and methodical adversary, brilliantly played by the veteran actor, that I wish we could have seen in more than one episode, as I feel that he could have been the Lex Luthor of this series.
A culinary selection that should teach a valuable lesson about failure and also about eating before your host.
Alright, let's get into the main villains of the show. There were two that were there from the beginning all the way to the end. The first one being Pete Hutter, played by John Piper Ferguson. Pete is your average career criminal and your standard Weasley bastard, who always gets his comeuppance. But the most fascinating thing about Pete, and you're gonna hear me say this a lot throughout this video, is that he was only supposed to be in one episode. Pete literally dies in the pilot episode, but the character went over so well that the producers decided to bring him back and make his questionable deaths a running gag, with Pete dying almost every time that he appears and then explaining away his resurrection with a ridiculous flimsy excuse.
I was only gut shot. I healed. I'm stronger now with less appetite.
Also, and this is really important, don't ever, ever touch Pete's piece.
My piece.
Nobody touches
Piece. Piece.
Alright, let's move on to the big bad of the series, John Bly, played by Billy Drago. It is my humble, personal opinion that John Bly is one of the greatest villains in all of fiction. He is capable, badass, powerful, and whenever he enters a scene, the entire vibe changes. Even when he is smiling, you know something terrible is about to happen. Just the way Billy Drago would deliver his lines, slowly, hypnotically, and without blinking, would make the hair on the back of your neck stand on end. He was just a great adversary for a great hero.
So long, County.
Alright, let's talk about our heroes, starting with Whip Morgan, played by Jeff Phillips. He was only supposed to be in one episode, but Jeff Phillips is just so damn charismatic and charming that he became a permanent fixture. Whip is the young, inexperienced wannabe hero, a card shark and a ladies' man, who inadvertently becomes the Robin to Brisco's Batman. But the Jason Todd Robin, not the Dick Grayson one, because Whip Morgan is a magnet for trouble.
Hey, Whip. Brisco. Bowler. How you been?
Oh, not too bad.
Professor Albert Wickwire, played by John Astin. Professor Wickwire very much represents the future. He is an inventor and forward thinker, who's always there to explain the anachronisms that Brisco runs into, and provide our hero with the vehicles and gadgets that he needs to save the day.
Professor?
Yeah.
Is that dynamite in your pocket or
Where?
are you here?
Socrates Poole, played by Christian Clemenson. Originally, there was a character in the pilot called Jonah Collier, who was a journalist who followed and reported on Brisco's career as a bounty hunter, and was supposed to function as the bookends for each episode, providing exposition directly to the audience. Socrates, on the other hand, was simply supposed to be the liaison between the Rubber Barons and Brisco, only meant to hand Brisco his assignments at the beginning of each episode, and that's it. But because he had so many scenes with Brisco in the pilot, Christian Clemenson built a great deal of chemistry with Bruce Campbell. So Jonah Collier was eliminated, and Socrates became the primary expository character. Furthermore, since this show represented the past and the future living side by side, Socrates very much represented the modern man, who relied on education and study rather than physical prowess and violence. But the coolest thing about Socrates is that in spite of being the tin horn of the show and not being an outdoorsman or a fighter, every time Brisco needed him, Socrates would be there. No matter the challenge, no matter the danger. Even though he was the most frail and vulnerable character in the show, he never ever hesitated to risk his life to help his friend. And that makes him more remarkable than the toughest tough guys.
Then what are you doing here?
What I can to help a friend.
Dixie Cousins, played by Kelly Rutherford. Now sing along if you know the words. She was only supposed to be in one episode. Brisco was supposed to be like James Bond and have a different romantic interest in every adventure. But while that works well from movie to movie, it doesn't work well in a TV show where they're literally shooting a new episode every week. Bruce Campbell said that it was awkward and uncomfortable as hell to walk onto set, introduce himself to a woman he had never met before, and then, just a few minutes later, have to shoot an uncomfortably intimate scene with her in front of the entire crew.
The thing about Brisco is that he's fairly reliable, but you got to watch him with the women.
Dixie was only supposed to be the femme fatale for the pilot episode. But because the pilot is an hour and a half long, and they spent just over a month shooting it, Bruce Campbell and Kelly Rutherford got to spend a great deal of time together and build more chemistry between their characters, which is very, very, very apparent.
Louis the 14th?
No. think Louis was the 9th or 10th. But then a lady never counts.
Hell, in the pilot, they even established a character called Amanda that was supposed to be Brisco's only recurring love interest. And I mean no disrespect to Anne Tremco, but she had no chemistry with Bruce Campbell. Kelly Rutherford, on the other hand, is the absolute perfect foil for Bruce, able to match him in every way.
Your dress is caught in my fly.
Oh, I'll get that for you.
Oh, no.
They just fit together perfectly. And in my humble opinion, she is the greatest romantic interest that Bruce Campbell has ever had in his entire career.
I just love it when you rescue me.
So much so that whenever you see him kiss another woman in the series, it just feels wrong, like seeing one of your parents kiss someone else. For this reason, Bruce would always campaign to have Kelly Rutherford back on the show. At one point, they even had Dixie replace a romantic interest for an episode that she wasn't supposed to be in, where the actor they had lined up to play the part dropped out last minute. But even then, the replacement was so seamless that you wouldn't know that it was a last minute adjustment, because Kelly Rutherford just fit in so perfectly in the show as the main romantic lead. Henceforth, she ended up appearing in 7 out of the 27 episodes that were produced for the series. And the crazy thing is, it feels like she was there for more. Singer, con artist, and heartbreaker. Dixie was just the total package.
If I had a nickel for every time a man said that to me, I'd be living in Fort Knox.
You're already as good as gold, Dix.
Lord Bowler, played by Julius Carey. Named after Lord Baltimore from Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, originally, Bowler was supposed to be Brisco's bounty hunting nemesis, the competition in his hunt for Bly and his gang. But like the majority of the actors that I've talked about in this section, Julius's chemistry with Bruce Campbell was just undeniable. So little by little, Bowler was changed from Brisco's rival to his partner. They went from having a Bugs Bunny Daffy Duck type rivalry to more of an Iron Man War Machine or Captain America and Falcon type friendship that was brokered by Miss Dixie herself.
Maybe you two should throw in a towel and work together. Get the job done twice as fast with half the effort.
I work alone.
So do I.
Well, then it's settled. Now what are we gonna do about a ride?
Bowler is like Bass Reeves, Daffy Duck, and B.A. Baracus combined. Throw in Julius Carey's undeniable charm and comedic talent, and you have one of the coolest characters in the Western genre. My favorite aspect of Lord Bowler is how he might appear to be a roughneck, but in actuality, he is an independently wealthy and classy guy, whose lordship is a genuine title rather than an affectation.
Welcome home, my lord.
Thank you, Reginald.
I trust you got the bad guys.
And on the subject of actors who had extraordinary chemistry with Bruce Campbell, Comet the Wonder Horse. Comet is Brisco's trusty steed and companion, who often gets our heroes out of the occasional jam. Now, Comet was played by 5 different horses, depending on what trick they needed him to perform. For example, whenever Comet needed to rear, that was performed by Ace. However, the horse that would interact with Bruce and the other actors during scenes involving heavy dialogue was Copper, who was very good about standing by patiently while a scene was being filmed, and would often have really good reactions when addressed directly, and by all accounts, was a very good scene partner, honoring Comet's reputation as the smartest horse in the world.
Try the door now.
Brisco County Jr., played by Bruce Campbell. Brisco County Jr. is Bruce Campbell's favorite character that he has ever played, and it's easy to see why, because he is one of the absolute best. Dare I say, even better than Ash Williams. Brisco is the thinking man's hero, the best of both worlds, a Harvard-educated lawyer and a badass bounty hunter trained by one of the best to ever do it. While Brisco can outride, outfight, and outshoot any outlaw, more often than not, he chooses to outsmart them. He is always willing to think outside the box and embrace the future rather than rely on the past. A theme that is brilliantly explored through all of the show's anachronisms, as a lot of elements and technology appear in the show much earlier than they existed in actual history, which Brisco often refers to as the coming thing.
Now this is the coming thing.
Brisco is a forward-thinking hero honing his body and mind for whatever challenges the future might bring. Season 1. While the show was only on for one season, so much happens in those 27 episodes that it feels like it was on for much longer. While the pilot is pretty long, the pacing is excellent, and it serves as the perfect crash course for the series, establishing all of the characters, tone, and key elements in the span of an hour and a half, and very much living up to the style of action-adventure serials, complete with cliffhangers and each act having its own individual title.
Chapter 1. I'll be sawing you in all the old familiar places. It's catchy.
The story arc for the season is established right away. Bly and his men kill Marshall County, and Brisco is called in to hunt them down and bring them to justice, a crusade that Bowler reluctantly joins. But there's a twist. There's an otherworldly MacGuffin called the Orb that seems to be the main motivation for John Bly's crimes. And if Brisco wants to stop him, he has to find the orb before the villain does and uses its mysterious power for nefarious means. So what is the orb?
The orb is a man-made electromagnetic wave particle net that captures energy at certain nodal intersections of the space-time grid.
Yeah, that really didn't clear anything up. Basically, the orb serves as the source for all of the show's sci-fi elements, the gateway for all of the supernatural wackiness in the series, like the Hellmouth in Buffy or the Rift in Torchwood. More often than not, the orb's energy creates some unforeseen effect that leads to the conflict in one of the episodes, which then Brisco and Bowler must solve, all the while still trying to hunt down the Bly gang. But that's not all. There are some great standalone episodes in between that are more character-driven and showcase Brisco and Bowler's journey from anonymous bounty hunters to famous Western legends.
You're Brisco County Jr.
Yeah?
Brisco's faithful companion.
If anything, he's my companion.
The standalone episode that I recommend the most is the Bounty Hunters Convention, where Brisco and Bowler are invited to a private island with all of the West's greatest bounty hunters for a convention, only to find themselves in the middle of a murder mystery as an unknown assailant starts picking them off one by one. So it's up to our heroes to solve the mystery and save their colleagues.
During your somniferous plod across this brooding moor of mystery.
What'd he say? He likes my style.
The bad news is that the show was cancelled after only one season, but the good news is that in spite of that, they still managed to conclude the Orb Bly storyline in the episode By Bly, where Brisco and Bowler claim that they have already defeated all 13 members of the Bly gang, even though we only actually see them apprehend or kill 9 of them. What happened to the other 4? Personally, I like to believe we would have seen those encounters in flashbacks during future seasons. Anyway, in this episode, we see Brisco and Bly's final epic encounter, and Brisco sends the orb back where it belongs. Was that the definitive end of the orb? Doubtful. But the point is that at least the storyline got some closure before the show ended.
Brisco, we just be cowboys from now on.
Sure thing, partner. Let's ride.
After defeating Bly and his gang, Brisco and Bowler are deputized by the president to go on secret missions for the US government, which leads to the series finale, the two-parter High Treason, where our heroes go on a secret mission to Mexico to rescue the daughter of a powerful publisher from a revolutionary named Falcone. But the whole thing turns out to be a setup by American traitors to use Brisco and Bowler as scapegoats, discredit the president, and start a war between the US and Mexico. Oh, and here's a fun fact. The big cliffhanger in the middle of these 2 episodes is Brisco and Bowler being executed for high treason. And while the second episode did premiere the very next week at the same time, it was preempted with sports in most regions. So, for the longest time, most people thought that this is how the show ended, with the 2 main heroes being gunned down by a firing squad. I assure you, that was not the case. They survived via Professor Wickwire switching the firing squad's ammo with rubber bullets. They assemble a badass team of allies and go on to clear their names, save the day, and ride into the sunset.
What do you say we put some miles under these horses?
Which?
And just like that, one of the greatest action-adventure shows to ever air on American television ended. The question is, why was it canceled? The pilot, sadly, was not successful, drawing a very low viewership. But to Fox's credit, the network had lots of faith in the show, so they ordered a full season believing that the viewership would increase as the season progressed. But sadly, that was just not the case. So the network had no choice but to cancel the series. According to Jeffrey Bohm and Carlton Cuse, if the show would have gone on for a second season, Brisco would have married Dixie and become the sheriff of a small town populated by very peculiar citizens. And for some unexplained reason, the town would have been a magnet for all sorts of paranormal activity, which admittedly would have made the show even more like Buffy and Torchwood. The good news is that the show did develop a cult following in the years to come, and would eventually have a very successful DVD release, and even find new life on streaming. To this very day, fans still ask Bruce Campbell to please do a continuation, and as tempting as that might seem, in 2008 we sadly lost Julius Carey, and without him the show just wouldn't be the same.
Final verdict.
Bruce Campbell describes the adventures of Brisco County Jr. as one of the most exhausting but rewarding experiences of his career. And it is apparent, as a lot of quality, love, and legitimate peril went into every episode. No CG, no grandstanding, no over-the-top big-budget nonsense. Just a good old-fashioned action-adventure show, with cool stunts, true romance, and heroes who would fight to protect the past to ensure the future. So if you like genre mashups with plenty of heart, The Adventures of Brisco County Jr. is the show for you. 10 points on the badassitude meter. Keep an eye out for the coming thing, try not to touch Pete's piece, and give it a watch. Until next time, I'm Erod, and I'm the Blockbuster Buster.
Kansas, Wiley Stafford just touched Pete's piece.